Why are humans the only species forbidden from carrying weapons in galactic assemblies? Ambassador Zak adjusted his ceremonial blade, ensuring it sat properly against his azure scales as he glided through the security checkpoint of Nexus Station, home to the Galactic Assembly. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence of Ordanian expression of mild amusement as he observed the commotion ahead. "Ah, the humans have arrived," he muttered, mandibles clicking with barely contained laughter. The security line had ground to a halt as a team of no fewer than 12 officers representing 6 different species swarmed around the 3 human delegates. Unlike every other diplomatic party in the massive docking bay, who proudly displayed ancestral weapons or ceremonial arms as dictated by interstellar protocol, the humans stood with their arms raised, wearing only simple garments. No weapons, no accessories, not even data tablets. "Ambassador, good rotation to you," chirped Plex, a young Meridian whose fuzzy antennae vibrated with excitement. Today marked the rookie's first shift guarding the diplomatic entrance, and Zak had known the youth's parent a distinguished scientist for many cycles. "And to you, young Plex, I see you've drawn human duty on your first assignment. The universe has a sense of humor after all." Zak's secondary arms performed a gesture that roughly translated to cosmic irony. Plex's compound eyes darted between the ambassador and the humans, who were now being scanned by specialized equipment that no other delegation required. "I don't understand, Ambassador." The Talgrak delegation arrived with pulse pikes. The Zoxian ambassador brought her ancestral venom blade. "Even you wear the blade of diplomatic truth. Why are humans the only species subjected to such thoroughness? They appear completely unarmed." Zak released a wheezing sound from his breathing slits, the Vordanian equivalent of a snort. "That, my young friend, is precisely why we check them so carefully. Did no one brief you on humans?" Plex's antennae drooped slightly. "The security manual just says follow Special Protocol H-17 for human delegations without explanation." H-17, Zak mused. How bureaucratically vague. "Well, we have 6 hours until the assembly convenes. How would you like to learn why humans are the only species in the known galaxy forbidden from bringing anything into diplomatic gatherings? Not just weapons, anything." The security officer's antennae perked up with curiosity. "It's quite the story," Zak continued, his upper eyes narrowing mischievously, while his lower pair tracked the humans, who were now smiling pleasantly as they were escorted through. "And I promise you, once you hear it, you'll never look at a human the same way again. Nor will you look at a pencil the same way, for that matter." "A pencil? Is that some kind of human weapon?" Zak's 4 eyes blinked in perfect unison of Ordanian expression of profound understatement. "Oh, my naive young friend, that's exactly where our story begins." Zak guided young Plex toward the staff lounge, his ceremonial blade jingling against his scales. They settled into rest cradles designed to accommodate various species' anatomies. The ambassador's 4 eyes took on a distant look as he began his tale. "It all started 75 standard cycles ago, what humans would call years. The discovery of Earth sent ripples through the assembly. A Class 5 world that had developed faster than light travel, despite being locked in constant conflict. Unprecedented. The diplomatic corps dispatched first, contact specialists immediately." Plex leaned forward, antennae twitching with anticipation. "Now, standard protocol dictated that Earth send representatives to the assembly for formal introduction. Every species brings their ancestral or ceremonial weapons, a tradition dating back to the founding of the Galactic Assembly. It symbolizes trust, you see. I bring my weapons before you, yet I choose peace." Zak gestured to his own ornate blade. "The humans arrived in a single vessel, primitive by our standards, but impressive considering they'd only achieved FTL capabilities 3 decades earlier. Their delegation was led by Admiral Tessa Blackwood, a formidable female with skin the color of Zentaran copper and eyes that reminded me of Ovalian storm clouds. The ambassador's voice dropped dramatically. She wore what they called a dress uniform, navy blue with gold accents, and completely unarmed. This immediately caused a stir. The diplomatic corps had transmitted our protocols, including the ceremonial weapons requirement. Yet Blackwood arrived empty-handed. Plex's mandibles clacked questioningly. "Oh yes, we asked about it," Krilzak continued. Blackwood simply smiled. "You know how humans bare their teeth to signal non-aggression," still unsettling, and said, "Earth has known too much war. We come without weapons to demonstrate our commitment to peace." The ambassador's secondary arms made a fluttering gesture. Most species found this touching. The Artarians were practically oozing emotional pheromones. But Lord Droom, the Zolaxian representative, he saw weakness. Krilzak's voice shifted, deepening to mimic the Zolaxian's guttural tones. "So the primitive apes come before us unarmed and expect protection? How typically underdeveloped. Perhaps we should assign them a guardian species until they evolve proper diplomacy skills." Plex gasped. "He didn't." "Oh, but he did. And it gets worse." Krilzak's mandibles clicked with remembered tension. The first speaker attempted to smooth things over, but Droom continued. "Look at them, bipedal mammals with barely enough brain power to achieve spaceflight. No natural defenses. No evolutionary advantages. The weakest apex predator I've ever encountered." "I don't understand," Plex interjected. "Insults happen in the assembly all the time. Why was this significant?" The context, my young friend. Humanity had just emerged from their most destructive regional conflict, World War III. They called it. Billions dead, cities vaporized, yet they'd still achieved FTL travel ahead of schedule. And here was Droom, calling them weak and primitive while they stood before us having mastered both nuclear fusion and interstellar travel, despite nearly annihilating themselves. Twice. The ambassador's upper eyes narrowed. Throughout Droom's tirade, Admiral Blackwood remained perfectly still. Only those of us nearest noticed her eyes. They changed. Like watching a predator's pupils dilate before it strikes. Krilzak shuddered despite himself. Then came the moment that changed interstellar diplomatic protocol forever. Blackwood raised her hand, a human gesture requesting acknowledgement. The first speaker, relieved at the apparent diplomacy, granted her permission to address the assembly. The ambassador leaned closer to Plex, all four eyes unblinking. "That, my young friend, is when we learned what humans are truly capable of. And why none of us have slept soundly since." Admiral Blackwood smiled, that unsettling teeth-bearing expression, and addressed the assembly with a voice as calm as vacuum. "Honored representatives of the galactic community, I appreciate the opportunity to respond to the Zolaxian delegates' assessment of humanity." Krilzak's voice shifted to mimic Blackwood's measured tones, and Plex found himself leaning forward, completely enthralled. Then she did something so innocuous that most security systems didn't even flag it as notable. She turned to her aide and said, "May I borrow a writing implement?" The aide, Lieutenant Felix Navarro, I believe, handed her what appeared to be a simple stick of wood with a darkened tip. "A weapon?" Plex asked, antennae quivering. No, that was the point. It was just a a pencil. A primitive analog writing tool. Graphite core in a wooden shaft, about 15 centimeters long. Something their young use in educational facilities. Krilzak gestured dramatically with his secondary arms. Lord Droom, of course, couldn't resist commenting. "See how they still use physical marking implements. My species outgrew such crude tools before we achieved atmospheric flight." The ambassador's eyes all blinked in sequence, indicating profound dramatic effect. Blackwood held up the pencil so everyone could see it. "This simple tool," she said, "is indeed just a writing implement. Yet since Lord Droom seems concerned about humanity's defenselessness, perhaps a demonstration is in order. Plex's compound eyes widened. What happened next occurred so rapidly that 11 species' visual processing systems couldn't track it properly. The security recordings had to be slowed to 1/16th speed for analysis. Krillzak's voice dropped to a near whisper. In under 12 seconds, Admiral Blackwood demonstrated 17 distinct methods to terminate life using only that pencil. Impossible, Plex exclaimed. I witnessed it with all 4 of my eyes, young one. She moved with such precision. First, she demonstrated a throat puncture, stopping millimeters from a major blood vessel on her own wrist. This would sever your carotid artery, she explained clinically. Then she showed how the pointed end could penetrate the visual cortex through the orbital socket. This enters the brain directly, causing instant death. Krillzak's 4 eyes darted around nervously, as though re-witnessing the spectacle. She showed pressure point strikes, explaining how the pencil could amplify force against nerve clusters. She demonstrated how breaking it created multiple weapons. She explained how the graphite could be weaponized if crushed and blown into sensitive breathing apparatus. Each move flowed into the next with terrifying grace. The ambassador's scales rippled with remembered anxiety. Most disturbing was her demeanor, educational, like a professor teaching elementary physics. The leverage principle allows even a physically weaker human to generate sufficient force to penetrate the thickest hide. She explained while demonstrating a strike that our combat experts later confirmed could puncture Zontharian battle hide, which can repel lower caliber pulse weapons. Plex's antennae had gone completely rigid with shock. The assembly chamber fell into absolute silence. Species with multiple hearts reported several of them temporarily stopping. The gaseous collective actually condensed partially in shock. And Lord Droom? His scales turned the pale blue of extreme terror. Krillzak waved his primary arms for emphasis. Then, as though nothing unusual had occurred, Admiral Blackwood handed the pencil back to her aide with a simple "Thank you, Lieutenant." She addressed the stunned assembly. We come unarmed because we choose peace. Not because we need weapons to be dangerous. Humanity respectfully requests admission to the Galactic Assembly. The ambassador's breathing slits fluttered with remembered awe. The vote was unanimously in favor. No one dared oppose. Security analysts spent months studying the recording. Their conclusion? Every single technique she demonstrated would have been lethal, performed with surgical precision. Despite being executed at speeds that made her arm blur to most species' visual perception. Plex's voice came out as barely a whisper. And that's why humans aren't allowed weapons. Krillzak made a clicking sound that indicated negation. Oh no, young one. That was just the beginning. The assembly still didn't understand what we were dealing with. That revelation came 6 standard months later, at the first Interspecies Peace Summit. The first Interspecies Peace Summit was held on Proxima Station, Krillzak continued, settling deeper into his rest cradle. Following the pencil incident, new security protocols were implemented specifically for human delegates. They were asked very politely, I might add, to submit any items they intended to bring into diplomatic chambers for inspection. Plex tilted his head. That sounds reasonable. Oh, certainly. And the humans agreed without hesitation. Their new representative, Ambassador Jackson Nash, was reportedly quite charming about it. We understand your concerns completely, he said. We'll cooperate fully. The ambassador's mandibles clicked in what Plex recognized as the Vordanian equivalent of an ironic smile. Nash was a different type of human than Blackwood, taller, with skin several shades darker and a voice that resonated at a lower frequency. Where Blackwood had been all military precision, Nash was casual elegance. He arrived at the summit carrying only one personal item, a ceramic vessel for holding their stimulant beverage. Stimulant beverage? Plex asked. They call it coffee. Dark liquid, bitter alkaloids, caffeine compound. Quite addictive to their species, apparently. Nash's vessel, a mug. They call it was inspected thoroughly. The security detail found it contained only the beverage and was made of ordinary fired clay with a curved handle, but it was deemed harmless. Krilzak's upper eyes narrowed. The summit proceeded normally until the Kriltorian ambassador, Vordak, raised objections to humanity's proposed territorial boundaries. The Kriltorians, with their silicon-based biology, have always been confrontational. Vordak suggested that humans should be restricted to their home system for safety reasons and referred to Blackwood's demonstration as proof of their inherently violent nature. The ambassador's scales rippled with remembered tension. Nash listened politely, sipping his coffee. When Vordak finished, Nash set down his mug and said, "I understand your concerns, Ambassador. But I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about humanity that I should clarify." Krilzak's voice deepened to mimic the human's tone. "You seem to believe Admiral Blackwood was demonstrating our weaponry." She wasn't. She was demonstrating our thinking. Then an eyewitness this personally. Nash deliberately dropped his mug onto the conference table. It shattered into several pieces. Plex gasped. He broke safety protocols. Before security could respond, Nash picked up a curved fragment and held it between two fingers. "This edge," he explained calmly, "can sever most species' epidermal layers. This point can penetrate protective membranes. This large piece with the jagged end becomes a gouging tool." All while explaining this as casually as though discussing weather patterns. Krilzak's breathing slits fluttered with agitation. Then, and this was perhaps the most unsettling part, Nash picked up his mug's curved handle that had broken off intact. He slipped two fingers through it, creating what humans call brass knuckles, while simultaneously taking another sip of coffee from a remaining intact portion of his mug. "This reinforces the hand for striking," he explained between sips, while the pointed end concentrates force. The ambassador's four eyes blinked in sequence. Nash looked directly at Vordak and said, "You see, Ambassador, the difference between humans and most species isn't our technology or biology. It's that we evolved not just to use tools but to instantly assess anything in our environment as a potential tool or weapon. Admiral Blackwood wasn't showing off our combat training. She was demonstrating the most basic human instinct, adaptation." Krilzak shook his head in remembered disbelief. The summit chamber went completely silent. 3 different species translators malfunctioned from stress hormones overloading their operators. And Nash just sat there, calmly drinking from his broken mug while holding what everyone now recognized as an improvised weapon, smiling pleasantly as though discussing gardening techniques after the coffee mug demonstration. Krilzak continued, pausing to accept a hydration tube from a service drone. Security protocols for humans were tightened further. No writing implements, no beverage containers. They could attend diplomatic functions, but were restricted to specially designed furniture and provided with closely monitored utensils. Many species thought this would be sufficient. The ambassador made a wheezing sound that Plex recognized as the Vordanian equivalent of laughter. Naturally, we were wrong. Catastrophically wrong. Plex leaned forward, antennae quivering with anticipation. The incident occurred during the Centennial Galactic Unity Banquet, a lavish affair hosted on the Council Chancellor's personal station. For the first time, humans were invited to the exclusive gathering. Their representative was not a diplomat but Lieutenant Maya Rivera, a security tag assigned to their newly established embassy. Krilzak's scales rippled in remembered awe. Rivera was, how do I describe her? Physically smaller than both Blackwood and Nash, with what humans call olive complexion and dark cranial filaments tied back in a ponytail. She sat quietly throughout the 7-course meal, making pleasant conversation with a Traxian trade minister and a Volturian cultural attack. Nothing remarkable. The ambassador paused dramatically, all four eyes blinking in sequence. Until the dessert course. 6 Drelvik assassins, extremists opposed to galactic cooperation, somehow breached security. They targeted Chancellor Zukor, armed with molecular disruptors. Rivera was seated 3 tables away when they stormed in. Plex's mandibles clicked anxiously. What happened? What happened? Krilzak said, voice dropping to an intense whisper, defied comprehensive documentation despite being recorded by 14 different security systems. Rivera moved so quickly that even the Arcturian delegate, whose species processes visual information twice as fast as most, saw only a blur. The ambassador raised his primary arms for emphasis. Using only a cloth napkin, a standard-issue dining fork, and a glass of water, Rivera neutralized all 6 assassins in precisely 38 seconds. The napkin became a garrote for the first assassin, a blindfold for the second, and an impromptu restraint for the third's breathing apparatus. The fork, don't get me started on the fork. She used it to disable weapons, target nerve clusters, and at one point pin an assassin's appendage to the serving table. Krilzak shuddered visibly. And the water? She splashed it across the floor, creating a slippery surface that caused 2 assassins to lose balance, then used the empty glass as both a deflection tool and, when shattered, a distraction device. The Galactic Security Office spent 3 months analyzing the footage and still couldn't identify all the techniques she employed. Plex's antennae stood rigid with shock. Was anyone hurt? That's the most astounding part. All 6 assassins survived with non-lethal but completely incapacitating injuries. Chancellor Zukor wasn't even aware of the threat until it was neutralized. Most attendees didn't realize what had happened until it was over. And Rivera? The ambassador's mandibles spread in disbelief. She returned to her seat, straightened her uniform, and resumed eating her dessert, a frozen confection called ice cream. When the Chancellor approached to thank her, she simply said, "Just doing my job, sir. By the way, the catering is excellent. Compliments to the chef." Then she made what humans call a joke about how the excitement had worked up her appetite. Krilzak's breathing slits fluttered with agitation. The security footage became legendary. It's now required viewing at every diplomatic security academy in the galaxy. The Drelvik, not known for their sense of humor, have a saying: never engage a human with table linens. Their language doesn't even have a word for napkin anymore. They just call it the Rivera cloth. The ambassador leaned back, gesturing expansively. After that incident, no one questioned the necessity of special protocols for humans. The footage circulated among security forces, military academies, and eventually, despite attempts to restrict it, public entertainment networks. Viewing rates broke records across 17 systems. Merchandise was produced. I myself owned a commemorative hydration vessel with Rivera's silhouette. Plex's compound eyes widened further. So that's why. No, Krilzak interrupted. That's not even the end. There was still the matter of formalizing the rules. For that, we needed an emergency council session. The emergency council session was called just 3 days after the napkin incident. And Krilzak continued, settling into what Plex recognized as his official diplomat posture. Every member species sent their highest-ranking representative. The agenda contained only one item: the human security protocol problem. The ambassador's scales rippled with remembered tension. I was there as junior diplomatic attaché to the Vordanian delegation. The chamber was so packed that environmental systems struggled to maintain proper atmospheric balance. Chancellor Zukor opened the session with uncharacteristic bluntness. We have miscalculated the nature of our newest members. This must be addressed immediately. Krilzak gestured expansively with his secondary arms, and the scientific coalition presented their analysis first. Dr. Neil Vox, the preeminent xenobiologist, displayed a holographic model of human evolutionary history. Most spacefaring species, she explained, evolved from either cooperative pack hunters or prey species that developed intelligence as a defense. Humans are different. They evolved as what they call persistence predators. The ambassador's voice took on a scholarly tone. The presentation was fascinating and terrifying. Humans lack natural weapons, so they became tool users. They can't run as fast as their prey, so they develop stamina to pursue targets until exhaustion. They can't survive extreme conditions, so they created technology to adapt environments to themselves. Their entire evolutionary history is about turning disadvantages into strengths through improvisation. Plex's antennae twitched with sudden understanding. Security experts testified next. Comparisons with other species were illuminating. A Zentarian warrior needs 8 distinct weapons to handle different combat scenarios. A human can enter an empty room and create 8 weapons from whatever they find. The Merrex have retractable claws that evolved. Over millions of years, humans designed knives, then improved them countless times in just a few thousand years. Krillzak's 4 eyes blinked in sequence for dramatic effect. The comprehensive security review was damning. Blackwood's pencil demonstration, Nash's coffee mug lesson, Rivera's napkin incident, plus 16 other documented cases where humans had transformed harmless objects into weapons or tools with minimal effort. The conclusion was inescapable. There was no such thing as a safe object in human hands. The ambassador's mandibles clicked with finality. The vote was unanimous, a rarity in council proceedings. Resolution 14.7 billion. Due to their unique evolutionary history and demonstrated capabilities, human representatives shall henceforth be prohibited from carrying, holding, or otherwise possessing any non-biological object within council chambers, diplomatic functions, or interspecies gatherings of political significance. Krillzak made the wheezing sound of Vordanian laughter. Do you know how the humans responded? He didn't wait for Plex's answer. They laughed. Ambassador Nash issued an official statement accepting the protocol with good humor and understanding. Their media outlets ran amusing stories about being the most dangerous unarmed species in the galaxy. Some humans even considered it a compliment. The ambassador leaned closer to Plex. But the most unsettling part? When leaving the council chamber after the vote, Rivera, who had been invited to provide testimony, whispered something to her colleague just loud enough for several delegates to hear. She said, "They still don't get it. Do they? The most dangerous human weapon isn't anything we carry. It's this." And she tapped her cranium, the housing for their brain. "And that, young Plex," Krillzak said, straightening his ceremonial vestments, "brings us to the present day and explains why humans are the only species forbidden from carrying anything into galactic assemblies." The security officer's antennae twitched as he processed the information. Their break period was ending, and they needed to return to their posts. As they made their way back to the main diplomatic reception area, they noticed increased activity near the central chamber entrance. "Perfect timing," the ambassador remarked. "The human delegation is about to make their entrance." Sure enough, the 3 human representatives had completed their security screening and were being escorted toward the assembly doors. They wore simple, tailored garments in deep blue with silver accents, the official colors of United Earth. Unlike every other species delegation, they carried absolutely nothing. No data tablets, no ceremonial items, not even ornamental jewelry. "They look so harmless," Plex observed, compound eyes tracking their movement. Krillzak made his wheezing laugh. "That's perhaps their most dangerous adaptation of all. Look at them smiling, nodding, radiating warmth and friendliness." Ambassador Eliana Cortez in the center is responsible for negotiating the Orion Accord that prevented war between the Draxus Collective and the Meridian Alliance. The tall one is Dr. Marcus Okafor, their scientific attaché, whose work on quantum entanglement revolutionized our understanding of subspace communications. "And the third?" Plex asked, gesturing toward a shorter human with silver-streaked hair. Colonel Stephanie Wu, former Special Operations, now their security chief. She once prevented an assassination attempt using only a commemorative program brochure, folded it into some kind of projectile weapon. 3 guards dead before anyone realized what happened. Plex's antennae drooped in alarm, and we let them in. "We don't really have a choice anymore," Krilzak replied. "Despite everything I've told you, or perhaps because of it, humans have become indispensable to galactic stability. Their unique thinking solves problems other species can't approach. Their diplomats broker impossible peace deals. Their scientists make intuitive leaps that leave our researchers baffled. The deadliest species turned out to be our most valuable allies." As the human delegation passed, Colonel Wu turned her head slightly in their direction. Her eyes sharp and alert despite her pleasant expression locked onto Krilzak's. A small movement at the corner of her mouth, and then she deliberately closed one eye in a quick motion, what humans called a wink. Plex's antennae went rigid. A small, strangled sound escaped his breathing apparatus. Did she just acknowledge that she heard every word of our conversation despite being 30 meters away and behind 2 security barriers? Krilzak finished the thought. Almost certainly. Their hearing is remarkably acute when they choose to focus it. The ambassador adjusted his ceremonial blade, which suddenly felt significantly less impressive than it had that morning. "Remember this, young Plex. The most dangerous weapon humans possess isn't anything they carry, it's themselves. Their bodies, their minds, their relentless adaptability. The special protocol H-17 doesn't exist to protect us from human weapons. It exists to remind us that humans are weapons." They watched as the delegation disappeared into the assembly chamber, their empty hands somehow more intimidating than all the ceremonial blades, energy staffs, and ancestral arms carried by the other species combined. The great paradox of galactic politics, Krilzak concluded with sardonic amusement, is that the species we most fear becoming our enemy has become the ally we can least afford to lose. Let us hope they continue to find us more useful as friends than as adversaries, because the universe help us if humans ever decide otherwise.